Hey, what's up, everybody? Do you think there is a chance, just a little chance, that the government is getting a little bit censorious? Are you getting the feeling that they're just censoring a little bit certain people that do not want to go with their narrative? The government has become absolutely authoritarian. And yes, another word for when you talk about authoritarian, biblically speaking, could be the government's acting a little bit like a beast. And you know what that is? I'm forgetting the word for it. It means that it is
all of this to me is just satanic.
Yes, it's satanic. It's crazy what's happening. It's not just the power of the state. It's all of our institutions are joining together to crack down on people that they disagree with. It shouldn't be a surprise. Remember that time, like a few weeks ago, when the president just said that half the country was semi-fascist, half the country was bad? Why is that? Because they're like, I don't know, like pro-lifers. Well, now we've got the FBI going against pro-life. You know what pro-lifers, you know what you need to get a pro-lifer? Like 30 armed guards, all right? Today, we're going to talk about a lot of this stuff, a lot about the news and what is happening and why it's important that Christians actually pay a little bit of attention up in here on Cooper Stuff. Cooper Stuff! What is up? How's everybody doing? Welcome back to Cooper Stuff. Things are getting a little freaky. I don't know. It's a little crazy. If you care about that sort of thing, here's what you need to do. Number one, go to johnlcooper.com. I want you to give me your email address. Go down there where it says sign up. Here's the reason why. We don't know what kind of censorship is going to happen. I know that we don't think that could happen, but we also didn't think that, the FBI show up with 30 armed guards to arrest a pro-lifer. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. So I'll tell you what, give me your email address so I have it. I want to make sure I tell you about things that are coming out, especially when my book is announced in a few months. And you can do that, johnlcooper.com. Do it now. Second thing, because we don't know what's going to be happening in the future, we already know what's happening in the world right now. If you want to find a way to do some good investing, you may want to do what I do, which is put a little bit of my money into precious metals. All right, I'm talking about gold and silver. And of course, you got to talk to my friends at S.W.A.T. I'm not a financial manager and I ain't that smart, but I'm definitely not telling you to go sell everything you have and buy a bunch of gold. But it is a great idea to diversify, and precious metals have proven over time to keep their value. So in a time when we are printing money like cray, you may have noticed it's called inflation. Hello. Have you noticed what all is happening? The cost of eggs and milk and gas, all the things that you know that are already happening. While all that is going on, we are printing money like crazy. We can't keep up with it. What it means is that your dollar is going to be worth less. Historically, precious metals have kept their value. They've done well over time. So if you want to diversify, all you got to do is text the word Cooper. That's my last name. Easy to remember. Text Cooper to 465-322. That is 465-322. That spells gold 22. They're going to send you a brochure. They'll send you some information. Unless you're like, dude, I want to buy something now, then all you got to do is text Cooper, and they are going to give you a discount on your first item. All right. There's no obligation. So if all you want to do is read a little bit of literature, it's easy. Text word Cooper, 465-322. They will send you something over there. SD Bullion's awesome. They're a Christian-owned company. They send it straight to your door. I've bought all of my precious metal with them, so check it out. Now I think it's time to jump into this episode. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Cooper Stuff. All right, so today we are going to be talking about some news items, as I've already mentioned. I want to talk about this thing that's happened with a pro-life guy that's been arrested. This is crazy. I also want to talk about what's going on in Iran. I've received a lot of messages. People say, John, when are you going to talk about what's happening in Iran? We have some fans in Iran too that have been saying, how come you're not speaking? You're not being a voice for us. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I do not like speaking about things that I'm just ignorant on, because it's not helpful. And I find global politics to be very confusing. And if we get to it, we have a third item that we'll talk about, which is just a general sort of censorship type thing happening, but we'll see if we get there. So what I need to do is to bring on a couple of people that are more filled in. So I got some friends here. One of these guys You already know from Cooper stuff. He's been on the show before. Billy Hallowell. Say hello, Billy.
Hello.
Billy, you've been on a couple of times. We talked about your book, one of your books, I should say. And I had you on again. We talked about prayer in schools and things like that. And I appreciate you being back on the show. And we're introducing for the first time Dan Andros from Faithwire. What's up, Dan?
What's going on, John? Appreciate you having me on.
Hey, it's good to have you on the show. I've been on your show, and in fact, I've been on your show with Billy. We've been a trio before, but it's good to have the trio on Cooper stuff.
Yes, sir.
And I noticed that you're drinking from a Cooper stuff mug over there.
It's a nice
Of course. Why wouldn't I?
Nice
I mean, look at this mug. It's fantastic.
Honestly, and be serious for a second. Does it make coffee taste better?
Well, I'm don't judge me, everyone, but I'm a tea drinker.
Judge.
I'm a tea drinker, number one, and it tasted just fabulous. My tea this morning. But I currently have Mountain Dew in here. So
yeah.
Diet Mountain Dew. If I know
Diet
Dan,
Mountain Dew. This is how I roll.
Mountain Dew.
Look, for all of you who like to drink soda, try diet, because what you can do is you can just drink unending amounts of diet soda. So, I mean, don't come to health advice for me, to me for health advice. Not a good idea. But anyway.
Yeah, we may be getting censored for disinformation with that last, which I got to tell you, I will not put up with. I think it's the government's job to shut everyone up that doesn't say whatever they want. That's what I think. All right, that was a joke because I'm not a commie. All right, so we got to jump into the very first thing. It's great to have both of you guys on. Thanks. I want to talk about this pro-life situation. This guy. And the reason I wanted to have you guys on is because I don't want to be a hack and only believe the first thing that shows up on my news feed. And I kept looking at this thinking, this can't be right. There's no way this is accurate. There's something I'm not understanding. I heard S.W.A.T talked about it, and I'm like, well, maybe there's everything. I've never found anything that makes me think that I'm not hearing the whole truth. So I don't know, Dan, it sounds like that this happened where you live. So maybe you can fill us in on this story.
Yeah, I mean, I got a text from my pastor and, people connected to our church. This happened in the same county as me. Essentially, a 48-year-old man named Mark Houck, who's a Catholic. He's pro-life. He's very active in the anti-abortion activism. He's out in front of the Planned Parenthoods, and he's ministering on the sidewalk there, doing a lot of great things. And he gets raided by the FBI in Upper Bucks County. I'm in Bucks County as well, Pennsylvania. And he wakes up on a Friday morning. It was September 23rd, 7 a.m., knocking at the door. There are 15 to 20, at least, federal agents, heavily armed, surrounding his house, and they take him in.
I mean, you can see the video. They've got SWAT gear on, right? I mean,
well, yes, yeah. And you only see a picture is all I have seen of this so far. And you see a riot shield, long gun, and Mark's wife, Ryan Marie Houck, she wasn't able to get to her phone. They have 7 kids, and they were terrified. All these kids were clinging. Imagine this scene. Like, all these agents are around, banging on the door, yelling. They've all got guns. They came in. They were pointing the guns around the house, like sweeping in the direction of the kids. They're all crying. They're clinging to mom. She can't get her phone, and they take him away. And so she doesn't actually get a picture of it until after they come back, because they didn't bring the warrant the first time. She's like, you can't take my husband here without a warrant. And they're like, man, we're taking her either way. This is all according to her account. And and they eventually take him, but they did bring back the warrant finally, which it's kind of like you had one job, FBI, like bring the warrant to the scene. And so, so the kids are terrified, but she wasn't able to get her phone until they had come back. And then you still see 5 or 6 cars, but she said they surrounded her house. I mean, picture this. I mean, that's like something out of a movie, you're taking down Pablo Escobar or something. It's absurd.
It's crazy because I mean, you're going to get to this. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. You're going to get to the point in the story in which what this guy's actually done.
Yeah.
But I mean, we don't even see this for people who actually commit violent crimes. They don't show up with 30 SWAT officers sweeping through houses in a lot of the worst case scenarios. I mean, right? Am I crazy?
Correct. No, you're 100% correct. And particularly making this raid egregious is And I'll get through the backstory of which is what makes it even more absurd is the whole initial charge in the first place is it's basically because he shoved a guy, and it's an incredibly minor situation, and but it's even worse than that as far as the overreach here by the FBI. But we'll get in to that in a minute. But the FBI there being on the scene without the warrant, all of this with the heavy arms, everything, the shields, they didn't have to be there at all because his attorney wrote a letter to the DOJ saying, hey, look, you have no case here, but if you still want to pursue it, I'll bring my client in. And he's provided that in writing on email. So he's like, we'll save everyone the hassle. So they didn't have to be there. This was very intentional. They had to have done it on purpose to make a statement because in writing, they have a vow from the attorney that, hey, we'll bring him in. No need for it whatsoever.
It's crazy. And I think I just want to mention this. And the reason I'm having you on, so I should have mentioned, I forgot to a second ago, what Faithwire is in case people don't know. Will you tell us very quickly what Faithwire is?
Sure. Faithwire is part of CBN News, the Christian Broadcasting Network. And we are just a small team of Christians who are reporting the news from a Christian perspective. So it's Billy, myself, Trey Goins Phillips. And then we work in conjunction with the CBN News team and just producing content every day from a Christian perspective.
Yeah, good. So that's good to mention, just so people know that it just happens to be that you live in the area, but
right,
in other words, you cover the news. This is what you do, right?
Yes.
So I think that's important to say. So I think it's important to mention that we are right on the heels of. Sorry, I'm laughing, but you kind of can't believe it. We are on the heels of the president's speech like 3 weeks ago or whenever that was,
right?
Saying that semi-fascist MAGA Trump people are a threat to society. And I mean, I know I did a podcast saying this is what he's saying. He's saying that people like us are a threat. Why? Because we're pro-life. And is it wrong to say, dude, that was 3 weeks ago, and now the FBI is coming after a guy with full SWAT gear sweeping through his house? Is it weird to make that connection, or is it kind of weird to not make that connection?
It's weird to not.
Weird. Yeah.
It's weird to not make it. Well, I was just going to say, one of the things, because Dan did the heavy lifting on this story and has been on top of it, but, we were looking through it and I kept saying to Dan, what are we not catching here? Like, what are we not seeing about this case? Is there some other detail? And this is just a minor detail, but, we went back to the Philadelphia Police Department because that's where this happened to find out if there was a police report, right? What happened that day, like going all the way back to the beginning. And Dan can speak more to this, but we were able to get, and it's just a little snippet from them from October 13th, 2021, when this happened. It says, I have it right in front of me, that, he pushed this 72-year-old man. This caused the employee to fall onto the sidewalk and suffer a minor injury. And it has in parentheses, scrape to his right arm. That's literally the entirety of what this police report is that we were able to get from them. It's insane.
It's insane. And I just want to throw in here that the reason you would get the feds involved, in, any possible shred of a reason they'd get involved is if it were a FACE Act violation. Now, all of the evidence so far show, and a FACE Act violation is blocking someone from entering, a health clinic, like a Planned Parenthood or something like that, which I think it's, a stretch to call a Planned Parenthood a health clinic. But that's just me. He was nowhere near this incident. Mark Hawk was on the sidewalk ministering, and the man, first of all, there was no patient. There was no person trying to get in. The man's a volunteer. And the guy's name is Bruce Love, by the way. It's in public records, but for some reason, the DOJ and everyone else just refuses to name this guy. I don't know. It's like doing him a favor. Mark Hawk's name is getting dragged through the mud. And this guy, Bruce Love, is able to just, be an anonymous person making this claim. So what Mark alleges is that he was there with his son, his 12-year-old. They were doing this ministry together on the sidewalk in front of the Planned Parenthood. When Bruce Love gets agitated that they're there and begins just being foul-mouthed in front of the 12-year-old, and what appears to be an obvious attempt to just try to get him to leave because he's irritating them and he's being, vulgar and crass in front of this 12-year-old. but he gets really close to the 12-year-old, and Mark says, hey, you need to back away from my son. And the man doesn't do it. So he pushes him. Now, and it causes him to fall, and he gets the minor scrape that Billy mentions. Now, if that is even remotely accurate, who amongst us as fathers would not do the exact same thing? Who would not push this man away from our 12-year-old son? I mean, I certainly would, and I don't like getting, I'm not proposing, obviously, physical violence in any stretch of the imagination, but given what was happening here, it makes total logical sense that he would act that way. But that's it, though. And the police are called. Nothing happens. They say the minor scrape, so they don't press any charges. They say you can file a private complaint. Well, that's what Bruce Love does. He files a criminal complaint. Now, he doesn't show up to any of the hearings. And so Mark is there with his attorneys.
So the guy that files the complaint doesn't show up for his own trial.
Multiple times the judge says, okay, he's not here. We're going to reschedule it. Same thing. Doesn't show up. I think it was 3 times. And on the 3rd time, he said, look, if he doesn't show up again, I'm throwing this thing out. And he couldn't be bothered to show up again. And so it gets tossed out. Well, days later, Mark gets a target letter from the feds saying, hey, you're the subject, of an investigation, for violating these FACE Act, laws. And that's when Mark's attorneys then respond and say, hey, we'll cooperate. We don't think you have a case. We'll cooperate. They don't respond. The next they hear from the feds is that 7 a.m. in the morning on September 23rd, when they're banging at the door with 20 agents, heavily armed, surrounding his house.
It's just the weirdest. It's the weirdest story. Every time I read something about it, I'm thinking, what am I not hearing? Because even if you take it to its logical extent, let's say that he really, really hurt the guy and he used excessive force. You still don't have the FBI show up. Well, the whole thing is just is kind of crazy.
Well, and in the wake of the Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade, right? You would imagine that unless there's some smoking gun that none of us are hearing, like you're saying, like, is there something else? I don't know. We haven't heard it. We haven't seen it. The initial report doesn't indicate. Why is there nobody at the federal level sitting there thinking this is going to play really badly in light of the fact that we just had this massive change happen, right? That the Supreme Court ushered in. A lot of people are emotional about this. There's a lot of anger and chaos going on. You would think at the very least, they would think this is bad optics. Even if they wanted to do this, you have to sort of go back to the point of, okay, we're watching a scenario in which this happens to this man. And you have other examples of this happening as well. But you've got how many clinics that have been firebombed, that have been spray painted, churches that people have gone after. And as far as we know, because the FBI hasn't really given a real update and they've sort of declined to do so, nobody has been arrested in any of those circumstances. And that has been going on since February, March, April, May, after the draft leak came out of Dobbs, these attacks started. So you've arrested absolutely nobody who has actually damaged property and destroyed portions of clinics, but we're going after this guy. It's very bizarre.
And you're talking about pro-life clinics that help women do ultrasounds, help women get health insurance, and encourage them to keep their babies in this crisis pregnancy centers. That's what you're talking about, right? How they've been so targeted and the government hasn't done. I mean, it is such unequal weights and measures. And we all know this, but once you take God out of the position of being the one who tells us what justice is, what right and wrong is, what is moral, what is immoral. Once you do that, man's going to take the throne. Man becomes God, and then man just delivers injustice in the name of justice. And that's what I think we're seeing in such absolutely insane ways. Not to mention the fact that we're also in a time of the greatest level of hardcore violence in America in the last 30 years or something. I mean, you guys cover this stuff on the news, but it's 25, 30 years or something like that.
Well, and stretch beyond even the violence that we're seeing all over the country. Suicide is at an insane rate. We're watching suicide soar, overdoses soar. All of everything you just said is playing itself out into the culture in such a tragic way. And it's like everybody has blinders on. We're pretending this isn't happening when you could very clearly graph this out and see that move away from truth into this chaos has really bred all of these things.
Yeah. A couple other things I want to just mention on this, John, before I forget, as we're talking through this. I think the $64,000 question here on this particular case with Mark Houck is, why was this picked up by the federal government? It very much seems like that this was okay. Like the guy filed a criminal complaint. It ended up being a nothing burger in court. It was so unserious that the guy who filed the complaint didn't even bother to show up. Then why in the world would this get picked up? It's such a minor infraction, even if everything they say is true. Like what they allege is that he saw this man here and then didn't like that he was a volunteer, so he pushed him. Even if that were true, it doesn't even rise to the level of a FACE Act violation. So it's incredibly minor, particularly in compared to what they did. Like Pablo Escobar probably didn't have as many agents after him. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So that to me though is why, and his attorney Peter Breen spoke at a rally just the other day in Philadelphia for him, and he said what he wants to see is this case thrown out or them to win the case. And they're not done there. They want to go and get the attorney general in front of Congress. And he said he wants to get a personal apology from Merrick Garland to the Houck family face to face, because he thinks that's what they deserve. Because why they would pick that up, absolutely a head scratcher. It makes absolutely no sense, as you guys said, unless there's some bombshell in here that nobody has seen yet. But I mean, I've gone way farther into this story than I care to go into any story. You know, I've seen all of the details, all these videos, and every bit of evidence that I see backs up Houck and his case. And I'll be the first to tell you if he's done something incorrect that I see that, okay, maybe they have a point here. I have not seen that yet. And then the other thing I want to mention is not long after Houck was raided, 11 other pro-lifers were then, raided or charged with these FACE Act violations in Tennessee. Now, theirs seems more like a civil disobedience situation. They were, I think, intentionally trying to block the Planned Parenthood creating a quote unquote blockade. But that's the sort of thing that you see. I mean, AOC and other Democrats do this in the street. They block the streets and they're making a point. They pay their fine. You move on with life, right? And so you can talk about that tactic. But again, it's a minor deal. Like it wasn't anything overly serious other than them making a point about abortion. And same thing. That was the video I think I sent to you, John, where you saw the FBI, a couple armed agents, again, with long guns and all of their tactical gear on, carting away a 60-year-old man who's otherwise been peaceful his whole life, aside from the horrible crime of standing in front of a Planned Parenthood door, which, by the way, let's not lose sight of the fact of what is going on at Planned Parenthood. They are killing unborn babies in Planned Parenthood. Let's just actually talk about the truth here for a minute of what is going on in these clinics. So, I realize that they're allowed to do that, I guess, in America today, even after Roe, but I digress. You have this 87-year-old woman is on this list, by the way. And I'm wondering, are they going to send 20 heavily armed agents to go take in this 87-year-old woman? Are they afraid of automatic sewing machines on her property? Will she have, I don't know, shoot dentures at them or something? Like, it's ridiculous what the FBI is doing. And it just seems like ahead of the election, the timing feels awfully convenient.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's hyperbolic to say the only thing that makes sense is that the administration is making good on what Biden just said in front of the entire world. These people are dangerous. Who? Pro-lifers, people that want to, roll back. What do you say? Roll back, right? He's talking about us. We are a danger, and they are trying to threaten Christians or people that just love the American way of life that watch. Maybe you're conservative. Maybe you just love America. I don't know what your deal is. We need to actually care about this. We're at a time when we're not arguing about political things like tax codes. We're not even arguing about things like immigration anymore. How much immigration, how much legal immigration, that's not what we're arguing. We're arguing about the authoritarian, tyrannical power of a government to crack down on people that they think are evil because of the things that we believe. You just mentioned that the guy wants he's asking for an apology from Mayor Garland. I was going to read this, and this is a perfect time for me to read it. This is in the book of Acts. A lot of people know this story. This is when Paul and Silas are walking, and remember there's the slave girl that is possessed by a demon. Spirit of divination.
Billy knows.
I know. Yeah.
And and she's annoying Paul, and and he cast this demon out. Well, he ends up getting arrested, right? He ends up getting arrested. Long story short, God does a miracle. The jailer gives his life to God, and he's like, oh my gosh, you got to come home to my family and tell my family the gospel of Christ. Paul goes with the jailer, who he's imprisoned, goes with the jailer to the guy's family, preach the gospel. The family gets saved, gives their life to Christ. Everybody's celebrating. And then the next day they come and say, hey, you, Paul, Silas, you guys are free to go now. And what does Paul say? I just want to read this real fast. This is starting in verse 35. But when it was day, the magistrate sent the police saying, let those men go. And the jailer reported these words to Paul saying, the magistrates have sent to let you go. Therefore, come out now and go in peace. But Paul said to them, they have beaten us publicly, uncondemned, men who are Roman citizens, and have thrown us into prison. And do they now throw us out secretly? No, let them come themselves and take us out. The police reported these words to the magistrates, and they were afraid when they heard that they were Roman citizens. So they came and apologized to them. It's funny because I wanted to read this, and then you mentioned that, because I think sometimes Christians go, hey, John, Billy, Dan, stop complaining. We're supposed to suffer a little bit in this life. Doesn't mean that we need to love it and be like, I can't wait for suffering so I can carry my cross for Christ. We're at a point that Christians need to speak up and say, hey, this is evil. This is wicked. This is what happens when the government acts like a beast. We should be calling it out. It's going to have some pretty big repercussions for us. So we can move to our second topic unless anybody wants to say anything about that before we move on.
I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add very quickly, because people are being lost in the mix of that, right? Like people's souls are being lost. They're being led down a horrible path when we're silent about things that deeply matter. That's all I wanted to say.
Good. I love it. Can't agree more. I also think it's ironic that the guy was a Catholic, because about 6 weeks ago, I had an episode called prayer beads are the new AR-15s. Remember? Because there was that article that came out that said that Catholics are now Christian nationalists, and their little prayer beads are actually as deadly as AR-15s. These people have lost. These people have lost their mind, and they clearly don't know what an AR-15 is either. No. All right. So anyway, so moving from that, the second thing I want to talk about, I've had a lot of people ask me about this thing in Iran, and I got to be honest once more, I don't really understand it. So Billy, I think that you're the one. I'm not sure which one of you is going to fill us in on this story.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll give bits and then you can ask questions, because it's really confusing. It really requires kind of going back to try to understand what is going on in Iran in general. How did they get where they are? But basically right now, people have seen the headlines. Iran, there are people in the streets. It's really driven by women. They are protesting. Some of them are demanding that the government is taken down. They want a new government. People are burning their hijabs. Those are their headscarves. And so people are seeing these images, they're seeing videos on social media, and they're wondering what sparked this? How did it get to this point? And to give the quick answer of sort of how this happened, it was September 16th. That was the day that Mahsa Amini, that was her name. She was 22 years old. She was taken in by the morality police. And we'll get to who the morality police are in a moment. But yes, that's a thing. It exists in Iran. And she was taken in as she was apparently getting off of a train, getting into a car with her brother to go visit her uncle. She was in the capital of Iran. And she had her headdress on, from what we understand. She had her hijab on, but it wasn't on properly. And women in Iran, they have got to wear, they're implored to wear that headdress. They have to do it. And so she was apparently approached by the morality police. She begged them not to take her in. They take her in. And what's very unclear is what happened once they took her to one of these, centers. They bring her there. Her family's waiting outside. And about 3 hours later, apparently, she's taken by an ambulance to the hospital. They allegedly keep the parents away from her while she's in the hospital. She slips into a coma. Obviously, what we're hearing is she was beaten. She was beaten in that prison and by the morality police, and she ends up dying 3 days later. In the mix of this, the Iranians are making all sorts of claims, the authorities, that she had some sort of underlying condition, and they released a video of apparently claiming it was her. She was sitting in a chair and she just fell over randomly, and that she had a heart attack or a stroke, and they're investigating to figure out what happened. Now, nobody buys that, right? Everybody believes that she was beaten. Her parents claim that they kept her covered up in the hospital, wouldn't let them near her, but one of her legs was bruised. They could see that. And so it's a really, really bizarre and tragic story. But what has happened is that everybody in Iran, I mean, this affected 80 cities. So you think back to the protests we've had in this country, at once, people in 80 cities coming out, women protesting. That's why they're burning their hijabs, because this all goes back to this obsession with making women wear this headdress. And so they are out in the streets. Men are joining them. It's a broad coalition of people in the country. And they don't just want change, these people, policy change. They want like regime change. That's a quick overview.
So they want regime change is freedom, right? In other words, they are a Muslim nation, right?
They are. And just so people understand, what's so crazy about Iran, it was called Persia until about 1935. And you go back to the 1930s, they had a leader who actually banned the headdress. So let's go all the way back. He was trying to modernize Iran, and a lot of other things happened in the mix. It's a very chaotic history. But in the 1970s, 1979, there was the Islamic Revolution, and they were being cracked down on. There was a lot of negative going on. But what's so insane about it is that they're worse off now, it seems, right? Just to kind of give, you mentioned it's an Islamic country. They're ruled very strictly and strongly under Sharia law. And women, for instance, they have almost no rights. They're not really a protected class. There are honor killings, which is when a relative or a parent will kill a daughter if they've dishonored them in some way. All sorts of horrific things. So it's not just about, Masha Amini's death. It's about what that represents, right? Which is really that women are downtrodden and have absolutely no rights in Iran.
Yeah, I mean, the things that I kind of wanted to mention, I mean, so much I want to mention about it. This is why it blows my mind when I constantly hear Americans on the left, typically, even the Christian left, freaking out about the oppression of women in America, the domination of women. It's Western civilization. It's because of the Christianity, the patriarchy, the systemic racism of Eurocentric white patriarchal Christians. And I'm like, are you not aware of what is happening in the world right now? Yeah. So we have this constant talk of Christian nationalism, and we're going to force everybody to be Christian, but we actually know what it looks like to have an Islamic nation that is run, I should say, by Sharia law. Nobody wants to do that in America under Christianity. It's the principles of Christianity and the Enlightenment Project that brought us the freedom to be a Christian or to not be a Christian. I don't understand why people don't understand what's happening in the rest of the world.
Yeah. I'll just add real quick, Billy, that I think, John, what you're talking about there, I think is a product of the incredible success America has had, and the prosperity that America has had over the last couple centuries has led to unprecedented peace and relative security, right? Obviously, nope, you're never safe from everything, but our lives are cushy, right, compared to the rest of the world. And I think what happens is you have these people out here completely detached from God, and they are just searching for meaning in any way they can find it. And they are finding it in the most absurd places right now because they're looking for purpose. They're looking to fight against some sort of struggle. And you have to invent all of these microaggressions in order to come up with that. When you're living in America, where you have pretty much relative peace and security compared to the rest of the globe.
I want to be careful too before I say this, because I'm not making a comparison between the current state of America and Iran, but it's interesting when you look at the morality police. These are people, and this is horrific. Again, there's no comparison, but they're going around these police. They have authority, they have power, they have the ability to basically imbue their Islamic, religion on everybody in the country. You got to wear the headscarf. You got to do this or that. We'll arrest you. There was a woman who dressed up as a man to go watch a soccer game because women aren't allowed to do that. She was arrested, right? And ended up setting herself on fire. It was this horrible story. But the point is, you can't do anything if you're a woman, and you've got these morality police running around. Here in America, we have this strange dynamic now of cancel culture and of going after anybody who says something we don't like and of trying to destroy them. And so we have to be really careful how we approach freedom and how we approach these issues. Again, not directly comparing them, but saying it's a slippery slope towards, really trying to crack down and not allow people to have different viewpoints. Or in the case of Iran, the extreme of not allowing people to live, not even be able to have life. Because you simply disagree with what they're wearing on their head. I mean, it's insanity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that ties in with the first part of the story. I mean, thankfully in America, as you said, we don't have that sort of, hard totalitarianism or whatever the word may be. It's softer. But I don't know, 30 police officers because you pushed somebody coming into your house. Now, again, that's not comparable, but in other words, we are in sort of I wouldn't say it's completely soft totalitarianism. There's always going to be a foundational religious push that is going to say, we want to take control. And this is why I don't understand why the Christian left, or even Christians who I think are probably in the middle, who they don't want to get involved. And I understand, but they want to be seen as the nice people. And believe me, I totally understand. I wish I could go back and be seen as the nice guy. It was
I think you're a nice guy.
Yeah, thank you. I was selling a lot of records back then. I would like to go back, but those days are over, son. I mean, that's not where we're at right now. So you're in this position where you want to seem like, well, they're both really. I could see what they're saying. I could see what they do not understand is this: Christians do not support, or all right, I shouldn't say every Christian ever. 99% of Christians do not want to become actual Christian nationalists if you are defining it as what we're seeing happen in Iran and meaning Islam, like an Islamic nation.
Yeah.
We don't want that. We don't want to send government troops to your house if you don't worship God on Sunday morning. We don't want to stone you to death if you're idolatrous in your heart. Nobody wants to do that. This is a country, as you said, we're decadent enough that we can just hate our own country. And that's the reason it matters. It's not because we want Christians to you got to get excited and sing, you're proud to be an American every day you wake up. which is hard to sing, by the way, because it starts on a weird note. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, because I'm proud to be. Usually songs start either like on the root note, which would be cause I'm, or something like that. It wouldn't be cause I'm proud to be. You're going down a fourth. That's a very strange way to start a song. But anyway, back to my point. You don't have to sing that. We're not trying to say you got to get all pumped up and become a MAGA guy. But what I do think is that the anti-Americanism has etched its way in to the Christian mind in America. And it's almost like the anti-Americanism made a gap. And then what goes into the gap ends up becoming an anti-Western civilizationism, if that's a word. It becomes anti the foundations of what built the world that we live in, which is Christianity. So I think a lot of Christians don't know it's anti-Christian, but they're letting these things in actually that are. And so rather than saying, hey, America's got some problems, but it's still a lot freer than other places, instead, we just bash Christians for being too patriotic or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I also think there's another thing under the surface of this, because if somebody is a real Christian nationalist, which the term is so difficult to pin down now, but, we're looking at Iran. If there were people who believe that way, sure, we could condemn it. But the term is actually being used more broadly because there are people on the secular side and on the left who don't want Christians to be politically involved. It's a way to sort of label everybody, right? Oh, those weirdos who are so dangerous, we need to keep them out of this. And it's just sort of another piece of the playing book that I think over the years we've seen the secular side operate from, telling Christians not to, hold their views strong when they go to the polls, don't vote through that lens. Meanwhile, they're voting through their own secular lens, right? Everybody has a worldview and a lens through which they're, looking. So I just think we have to be careful with that term, that Christian nationalist term. I'm seeing a lot of Christians embrace it. And, if you can't define it clearly, you definitely shouldn't be embracing it.
Yeah, don't wield it around. I just want to point out on this Iran stuff, Billy, you were talking about you didn't want to make a comparison. Well, CBN's Gary Lane has a great video on our YouTube channel where he actually quotes these two Iranians that are underground, essentially, don't want to make their face, public. But they were warning about some of the things they were hearing coming from the Biden administration. These are people in oppressive Iran hearing the language that our president is using, and they're like, whoa, that's a red flag. I mean, this is in Iran looking at America and warning it. But and I'll also say this, though, because CBN, a lot of our reporters have different contacts in Iran, and we talked to a ministry there, and they report that in spite of all of this oppression, that they're seeing people, because of it, being fed up with Islam and fed up with this tyrannical regime. And they're actually more open to the gospel, and they're more willing to hear it. And so they talk about just all the different ways that they're able to get, while some of the programming is banned, they can get satellite TV programs in that are Christian programs. So the gospel is still marching forward in Iran, which is really remarkable.
Oh, yeah. Amen. Yeah. I mean, I love that you mentioned that. Nothing can stop the forward movement of the gospel, Jesus Christ, the Lord of history. I'm glad you mentioned it, because all these things we all believe matter. We believe we should be saying something, yet we are not actually fearful. They're freaky, but we're not afraid. We're just going, hey, we think it'd be better to not go down this path. If we go down that path, what I think that we all believe is in the providence of God. God will use it for his glory, and he will use it so the gospel goes out and people will get saved, and so on and so forth. Also, I like the Billy that you mentioned. I think it's good when we use the word Christian nationalism. It's one of those terms that I just think you got to ask people what they mean. I mean, I don't mind when people use it, or if they don't use it, it's being wielded by a lot of people. And I will even just say it's interesting, because a lot of the people that I follow and I agree with are saying opposite things about using the term. So I don't use the term about what I believe, even though I believe we should be involved. I tend to agree with Michael Brown on this. Michael Brown is like, hey,
he's spot on, yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty spot on. I mean, I think he's like, let's don't use the term, because it does have a lot of negative implications to a lot of people, and it might just be easier not to deal with it. But at the same time, I've got Michael Knowles on the Daily Wire. He's like, yes, we are Christian nationalists. This country was built on, I mean, his point is it was built on Christian values. So we are Christian nationalists. We should have that. Then you've even got some of the people that would actually even be, I think, labeled theologically, they would be called theonomist. That'd be like Christian thinkers like Douglas Wilson from Blog and Mablog, and maybe even Apologia Studios and people. They might even be theonomist, but they would be like, well, what the world is accusing us of thinking Christian nationalism is, which I think there could be some sort of overlap with theonomy and Christian nationalism in a way. They're like, that's not even what we want. We don't want to start putting people to death that don't follow Christianity, but that's what the left is saying, and the Christian left is saying. So for my part, I agree with you. I'm like, hey, I don't condemn anybody that uses it in the way that Michael Knowles uses it. I just say, is that just putting ammunition in the hands of the other side? I'm going to stay away from it, and instead don't get. I say the same thing with the term systemic racism.
Yes, white privilege. All these terms.
Privilege.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't use them. Use the concepts. You talk about concepts and ideas and explanations, because you find many times, even in the abortion debate, you actually find there are a lot of pro-choice people. The majority of pro-choice people would cap abortion at 3 months, right? Now, yes. A lot of people don't like that. Some have different views on it. But the point is, most people don't know that. So if you sit down and talk concepts, that's a lot easier to actually help people understand what it is we believe.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I mean, right now you've got pro-life, then you have people that say they're pro-life, but they do support up to 3 months, but then they call themselves holistically pro-life, which basically means they're basically communist that would like to see less babies killed in the womb. So they're not really, a whole thing is anyway. All right, I got one more thing I want to read, if you guys don't mind, real fast. I want to get your take on it. So this was in the Daily Wire. New PayPal policy lets company pull $2,500 from users' accounts if they promote, quote, misinformation. I'm not going to read the whole article, but it says a new policy update from PayPal will permit the firm to sanction users who advance purported, quote, misinformation or present risks to user well-being, with fines up to $2,500 per offense. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Billy, I know that you have some pretty passionate feelings about this term misinformation. You're a journalist. You've been doing this for a long time. What is all this? This is insane. I mean, who decides what misinformation is? I say something that somebody doesn't like. Boom, it's misinformation. Boom, we're taking $2,500. Boom, we're going to freeze your accounts. This is getting into some commie territory here.
Oh, beyond. I mean, this is the left gets to decide because they control social media, Hollywood, media, universities. They control it all. So they make the decision. You know, there are only two genders. If you say that, apparently that's misinformation. Everybody knows it's true. It's not a baby. You know, Stacey Abrams is on a stage saying that's not a heartbeat you're hearing. It's the machine, you know, tricking you into. It's like, it's insane because what people are doing is they're taking mistruths, calling them the truth, and then punishing the people who are actually saying things that are true. And to put a monetary value on it in this way, and to take money from people because they don't even define it. As far as we know, the reports are saying it's very kind of cryptic. What does this even mean in that policy? So, I mean, this is the slippery slope we're talking about. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll let Dan weigh in, but when we cede ground in every single area in Hollywood and media, all of these places, which we've done, and we retreat, this is what happens. They have dominated in every way. And not only has it changed public opinion, but it's now actually being codified, not just in government, but in private business enterprises like this. And that is a dangerous thing.
I mean, let me just interject real fast, Billy. Can you think of anybody else that says things that are lies, but calls them truth?
Yeah.
Could that be Satan?
Yeah.
Could it be Satan? Yeah. All right. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they are Satan. I'm just saying that they are acting like Satan, which isn't that much better.
Yeah.
No, I just, I mean, there's a couple things here. One, like, do they not see the problem with, if you don't agree with this federal government agency, well, then you're mistruth. I mean, it's like, hello, have we all read George Orwell? I mean, 1984. The Ministry of Truth. I mean, that is what it is. Like, you can't do that. Like, you've got to be okay with the fact that, yes, sometimes there are going to be wrong things out there, but you have to trust that at the end of the day, the truth will survive the fire of all of this, conversation and debate going on, and mistruths, and eventually all those things will rise to the top. If you try to suppress everything, honestly, you don't. Progressives want to progress society. You do not progress society. The best ideas do not come forward when you are just stifling so many different things, and you're stifling conversation. You cause fear. People are afraid to say things. But I'll say with PayPal, first of all, I've never had $2,500 in my PayPal account. So are they going to send me a bill? Like, if I say something that is wrong, like what are they going to do? And it's really weird on how are they are they following me on, like, who says stuff on PayPal? I don't know how this all works.
Does it come out of your bank account? Because my bank account is linked.
That's true. It is tied to my bank account. So yeah, I mean, if I have a $2,500 debit on there, I'm gonna know what's up. I said something wrong. But I think what you're seeing though is this move into activism. So all these companies used to just be about, okay, I worked for Glenn Beck on Fox News, and they used to try to run all these advertising campaigns against us. Oh, stop Beck. We got to get him off the air. And the advertiser, we just say, hey, this attack that Media Matters or whoever would throw at us is ridiculous. And so we'd want to do like a counter campaign to like show them the truth of this. And all the times the executives would say, it's not worth the hassle. The advertisers just don't want the hassle. That's how they used to advertise. they just wanted to get the, maximize their profits, right? That's just what the goal of a company typically is. Now I think you're seeing this shift into, they've all decided that they need to be activists. Like, you would never see somebody like PayPal. I mean, some other, MailChimp is another one. They said that they were going to delete accounts. I mean, we left MailChimp immediately when I saw their policy change on that. I was like, we're done with MailChimp, out of here, because they're going to censor you if you say something they don't like. Companies didn't used to do that. And I think we're witnessing a time where we've seen a transition from companies being companies to now being activists.
Yeah, I mean, I'm about to say something really obvious, but since I got you guys here, I mean, can you think of anything that has been censored, right, or called misinformation that is something that people on the left are into? I mean, it's always when it's something that conservatives or Christians would agree with.
Oh, yeah.
Oops. I mean, I'm sorry. That was wrongly banned your account. Oops. And every single time it's a conservative, almost every time.
If this were held, if Fauci were held to this, can you imagine how many $2,500 debits he would have had out of his account at this point?
Yeah.
I mean, but I think it's true. I mean, when Abby Johnson's movie came out, when Unplanned came out, I remember watching the Twitter account, which had been live for a year and a half. And this is just one anecdotal example, but I think it's important. That Twitter account, live for a year and a half, weekend of release of the movie, is down and not working, is removed. All the followers are removed. Oh, it was a clerical error, basically, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is so diabolical. And to your point, Dan, the best way to win is have the best ideas. And then you argue them and you win. You know your ideas are bad when you want to prevent everybody else's ideas from being heard. Yeah. That to me is really the biggest piece of this puzzle.
Well, let me throw out one thing, John, before you sound off. My favorite example of this is the Babylon Bee getting censored. I mean, they're still not on Twitter. They are a satire site. I mean, you are like, hey, you know what? I mean, The Onion still exists. It's satire, ladies and gentlemen. It's supposed, by definition, it's fake. And they're getting suspended for fake information. I mean, it's just, you can't make this stuff up.
Well, I mean, I think point number one is that the world is so dumb that Babylon Bee doesn't sound like a joke anymore. No, I mean,
that's true.
It's the funniest thing happening on the planet is Babylon Bee, of course.
100%.
But it's not that far off from reality, which is why it's so funny. And so they're like, oh gosh, people are going to believe this is true. You're like, yeah, because you people are so stupid. Now, second thing I want to mention is this, guys, and I mean this sincerely. I do not appreciate you guys taking a shot at Fauci. He is the science become flesh. And so whatever he says is right. Whatever, he is the embodiment. All right. He is the body. He is the logos of science, if there's such a thing. So anyway, yeah.
Wait, I'm just trying to keep your PayPal money right now. That's all you're trying to do.
No, I was just gonna say, this is the Cooper stuff disclaimer. This is like when somebody criticizes the mafia, like, and the mob. Not that there's anything wrong with that at all or anything, right? It's like disclaimer.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just making sure I'm paying the right people here. Yeah, but I do know that some Christians are just like, all right, this is raw politics. I don't care. I totally understand why people don't care, but let's just bring it home. If what we are seeing happen, which we are, by the way, is that all of the institutions of power, as you just said, you've got the power, the overreaching power of the state. You've got big tech involved. Now you've got big business involved. When at one point, banks didn't really care about what you said on social media. They don't care who you vote for. They don't care where you go to church. Well, they really care now. Why? They're all joined together for one purpose, and that is political leftist activism. What do you think happens when, by the way, the only people they're censoring are conservatives, Christians, people that think like that? And they've censored all these things that have, of course, become true in the end as well. Things that are probably true. The lab leak theory, Hunter Biden's laptop. I mean, so much of what's just happened with the C word, which I'm not going to say so that we don't get pulled down on social media, but the thing that caused the lockdowns, I call it the C word. The things that the science become flesh kept telling us, all that stuff has kind of gone one direction. Do Christians not understand that eventually this will wreck our ability to share the faith online, to share the faith at our work, to share the faith at your school, your kid's school, to share your faith in the neighborhood. One of my pastors texted me last night and he said, "Hey, have you noticed that if there's any political signs in people's lawns, they're all on the left?" He said, "I haven't seen one political sign for somebody that is voting conservative." And I'm like, yeah, because they're scared to death too. There is a price to pay. Again, we're not afraid. If that happens, the gospel will go forward. God will draw people to himself. The power of the gospel say, we're not scared. We're just saying, hey, why don't we do what Paul did after Paul was arrested and say, no, we need an apology. You publicly did this. It was wrong. And we're just here to tell you, there's a truth higher than the power of the state. That's all I have to say. Before we end, Billy, you got anything you want to say?
I would just say, be bold, speak truth, love others, right? Those are the three things I think we have to do in light of what you just said, because we got to reach people.
Yeah.
Amen. Do we have to love others? The other things seem like more fun to me.
Agreed. That's why it was the third one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Dan, what you got?
I'll just say, I think it's like, going through the news every day, it's chaotic, it's chaos. And I think to your point, John, about God's sovereignty, we have to have this kind of balance in our minds of, okay, yes, we want to pursue godly ideals and the things that God wants us to pursue, but we also have to be at peace with the result being maybe there is going to be a lot of persecution. Maybe the FBI shows up at your door. Handle that as best you can, so that nobody, when the eyes are all on you, that nobody can really fling anything at you, because your actions are ultimately righteous. And so it is this balance, because I think we are living in a time of persecution. And to your point, John, I think we are going to see more of it. But keep resting in the fact that God is sovereign. His purposes will be accomplished, no matter if it doesn't end well for us or not. It didn't end well for all the apostles and Paul, all those guys getting persecuted, getting killed. So it might not end well, but we can still have joy in Christ in the midst of it all.
Absolutely. I love it. I hope you guys had an awesome time watching Cooper stuff. Have a great week.
Read the Bible.